Hey, welcome to Board Gems. This is my regular video series in which I cover older board game gems. And this episode is about a trick-taking game. Now, I haven't really done much in the way of trick-taking games, and I'm not a big trick-taking game guy. The one I want to talk about this week originally came out in Germany in the early to mid-2000s. And it was called Die Sieben Siegel, which I think means like the seventh seal. So it kind of has this vaguely kind of magical, but in a, I don't know how to describe it, like almost like a culty kind of vibe. English speakers, being the clever people that they are, turned Die Sieben Siegel into Die Steven Seagal. In the mid-2000s, the first English edition was from Simply Fun, and it was simply called Zing. Simply Fun doesn't have a great track record when it comes to clever names. They really have an eye and mind toward like non-offensive kind of mass market appeal names that literally could be anything. In more recent years, Amigo, who's the original German publisher of Die Sieben Siegel, changed the name to kind of try to piggyback off of the amazing long-term success of Wizard. Now, Wizard is a classic trick taker. It's something that I will probably cover at some point, but I didn't want to cover it today because I wanted to talk about Wizard Extreme. Wizard Extreme is the, if you were to get the German edition now, it would be called Wizard Extreme. And the most recent English edition came out just a couple of years ago from Eagle Gryphon Games, which they called Sluff Off. So it was designed by Stefan Dorra. Now, he's an old-school German board game designer, but he's done a number of trick-taking games, which are kind of adjacent to that style, right? And that they're simple rules, but they can be thinky if you want them to be, or as long as you internalize the rules, you can also play super casually. It's kind of up to your play style and up to your group. He's also done a trick-taker called Niet, which I think is also really, really good. I'll probably cover that at some point. It's for 3 to 5 players, although this version mistakenly says 2 to 4, which is unfortunate, but it's a 3 to 5 player game. Works well with all the player counts. 3 is probably its weakest. You probably want to aim for, if you're going to play it once, try to play it with 4 or 5 players. Ages 10 and up, probably pretty fair. 30 minutes, probably pretty fair. The idea is you play 1 round per player, so everybody has a chance to be start player. And in this version, that's true as well for 3-player games, so it's only 3 rounds. But it's not super satisfying. Probably you want to do 6 rounds, and I believe Wizard Extreme suggests that by default. So let me show you how this trick taker works. I'll use the Sluff Off components because that's the more recent English edition, and then I'll talk about why the game's a gem today. To set up the game, place the penalty tokens nearby, as well as this, which is the Sluffer token. And you're going to take the deck of cards, and you're going to take out a number of cards depending on number of players. So there's 5 suits, numbered 1 to 15. You're going to take out the 13, 14, and 15 in a 4-player game. You're also going to take out the 10, 11, 12 in a 3-player game. So there are 5 suits in the deck. There's 4 basic suits and 1 trump suit, which in this edition is blue. So a little bit of a simple explanation of a trick-taking game for those who are unfamiliar. It's a simple card game. Cards have suits and numbers. In a trick-taking game, each player will play a single card, starting with the start player. They will take a card and put it in the middle. And different trick-taking games have different conventions, but typically, whatever card the starting player plays, whatever suit, the other players have to follow suit if possible. So the next player in clockwise order, if they have a green card, they must play a green card. If they don't have a green card, they can play any other card. Playing a different suit would lose it, but playing a trump suit could potentially win it. Trump suits are more powerful than all the other cards. After all players have played a card, if anyone's played a trump card, then the player who played the highest trump card wins the trick. Otherwise, the player who played the highest card of the leading suit, the suit that started the trick. So in this case, green, if there were no trump cards played, then the player who played the highest green would win the trick. They would take the cards and then start the next trick. And that's a lot of trick-taking games follow that formula. So what's special about Sluff Off? Well, many advanced trick-taking games introduce the idea of bidding, where you look at your starting hand of cards and decide based on that how many tricks you think you're going to win. And if you're right, you'll get some positive points, and if you're wrong, you'll lose points. The unique thing in Sluff Off is that at the start of the hand, each player in clockwise order is going to take a number of these chips. These chips match the colors of the suits. Every time they win a trick of that color, they get to return a chip. So in clockwise order, players are going to take chips based on the number and suit of the tricks they think they're going to win. So if I have a strong yellow hand, I might take a number of yellow chips. Every time I win a trick, I get to return to the pile a chip matching the color of the trick just won. So if it was a yellow trick, the starting card was yellow, and I won the trick, I would get to return one of my yellow chips. Any chips that I still have at the end of the hand are worth -2 points. There aren't really positive points in this game. Your goal is to get as few negative points as possible. So at the beginning of the hand, you're going to take a number of negative chips, and then over the course of the game, try to lose them by winning tricks. If you overbid, so you end up with chips left over that you weren't able to get rid of, you're going to lose that many points. But what happens if you need to return a chip and you don't have that chip? You don't have that color chip. So I win a purple trick and I don't have any purple chips. In that case, I have to take a -3 black chip. So as an example, a trick might be a player leading with a purple card, and then other players must play purple cards if they're able to. Maybe one player doesn't have a purple card, so they get rid of something like that. They're not going to win. And then another player does that. They do have a purple card. Now, no trump cards have been played, so this is the winner of the trick, the highest card of the leading suit, which is purple. So if this player has a purple -2 token, they get to return it. And they're not losing 2 points at the end of the hand. But if they don't have a purple token, they must take a black token, -3 at the end of the hand. What if somebody plays a trump? This player doesn't have purple, so they play a trump. Well, in this case, the highest trump card wins it, so this player gets to return either a purple chip or a blue chip. You can return either. If blue was a leading suit, then the winner would have to return a blue chip. So there are a few other things going on. There are only a certain number of each colored chip. There's 5 blue trump chips, but there's 3 of all of the regular suits. If, when your turn comes around to take tokens to do your bid, and you want to take a yellow token, but all the yellow tokens have been claimed by other players, you can take yellow tokens from other players that have already taken them. What happens is you pass them a -4 white token, and you get to take one of their tokens. Now, the disadvantage to them, of course, is that if they still have this chip at the end of the hand, they're going to lose 4 points instead of what would have been 2. But the plus side is this is a wild. They can get rid of this chip in exchange for any color trick that they win. The last kind of wrinkle is the sluffer roll, and that's where this token comes in. When it's a player's turn to make their bid and take chips, If no one has done it yet, they can instead take on the Sluffer role. They take this token, and they don't take any chips. They play as normal, but they don't start with any chips, and they never have to return chips when they win tricks. They start off with a bottom score of -4, but they gain a point for every black token other players have to take. Note, though, that this is actually quite powerful in a 3-player game. There's only 3 players, and if one of them is a sluffer, it's pretty easy for them. So a variant in the back of the rules suggests that you actually start them at -5 instead of -4. This player will generally, I mean, it's situational, but generally the player will want to lose as many tricks as possible, force other players to win too many, which would require them to take -3 tokens, which will add +1 to the sluffer's score, up to a maximum of 0. At the end of the trick, after all cards have been played, each player counts the number of -2 chips, or -3 or -4, in front of them, and that's their score. So this player would score -9. The sluffer will score between -4 or -5 in the variant, up to 0. Players record their scores and play another round. You'll generally play a number of rounds equal to the number of players, so all players have a chance to be start player. That's it. You're ready to play Sluff Off. There are so many trick-taking games in the world, and it's a whole genre in and of itself, and not just trick-takers, but then there's a subgenre, trick-taking with a twist. And it seems like at any time kind of a more modern kind of game designer comes up with a trick-taking game, you know, they have to have their own spin on it, right? Otherwise, you would just play, I don't know, Oh Hell or Spades or some other trick-taker, Hearts, right? Like, there's got to be a reason you want to buy a dedicated set of special cards to play one particular trick-taking game. So, is this trick-taking with a twist? Yes. Now, firstly, I want to mention one thing, because the name of the Amigo edition now is Wizard Extreme. So Wizard, very famous trick-taking game, still a classic today. Now Wizard is basically the version that you buy of Oh Hell. You can play with just a regular deck of cards, a game called Oh Hell. Great trick-taking game. Wizard is that game with a few special cards. So what do I picture? Wizard Extreme. I would expect that to be Wizard with more extra cards, maybe. And it's not. Wizard Extreme is not very similar to Wizard, other than it's a trick-taking game. They're just using the name because Wizard is a perennial bestseller for Amigo, and so they come up with other games kind of in the same Wizard's cinematic universe. It is, in many ways, a very standard trick-taking game. You have to follow suit if you're able. If you can't, you can play any card you want, and the winner is the player who plays the highest trump, or if nobody plays trump, the player who plays the highest card of the leading suit. All very, very standard stuff. You can do like regular trick-taking games, and those are fun. And if you play a lot of trick-taking games, you need more and more. And one of the more, I guess I would say, advanced kind of additions to a trick-taking game, although it makes it a much more serious trick-taking game, you play less casually, is the idea of bidding. You look at your hand of cards and you try to guess how many tricks you're going to win. And you get big points if you're dead on. Maybe you still get some points if you get too many. You definitely lose points if you get too few, this sort of thing. Sometimes you lose points if you get too many as well. There's lots of variation there. So the twist in Wizard Extreme, aka Sluff Off, is that you don't just bid on how many tricks you think you're going to win, you bid on what color tricks you're going to win. So not only do I say, okay, I think I'm going to win 5 tricks, so your bid is 5. No, you have to pull tokens from the middle of the table indicating what colors those 5 are. And if you end up winning fewer tricks than you expected, you still have those tokens in front of you. Those are minus points. If you take too many tricks, you actually have to take penalty tokens, which lose you more points than the original. So it encourages you to kind of bid high and then try to make that bid. There's something definitely that you have to think about much, much more in this game. But it never feels crazy, crazy punishing. It's intimidating at the start of a trick to kind of take your tokens, right? Because those are all potentially negative points if you can't make your bid. But in the end, if you're under, you're losing 2 points. If you're over, you're losing 3 points, for example. And in the end, it all kind of works out. It's rare that players will get their bid like exactly. So everybody's losing points, right? It's like, oh, it's 2 here, 4 here. And as long as you play multiple rounds, it all kind of balances out. So I just found, and with regular trick-taking games that involve bidding, I found this as well. They're really intimidating to get into them. Like, if you haven't played this game before, it's like, oh, geez, I don't know what I'm going to bid, right? And a lot of those bidding trick-taking games are very punishing because you only get points if you get it exactly. And if you're off by even 1, maybe you're losing points, right? And this one is intimidating at the beginning, but the result at the end of the trick is less intimidating. It's everybody's probably going to be losing points by the end, usually. So it kind of balances out, especially over the course of multiple rounds. So it might be intimidating at the start, but, you know, stick with it, carry through, play a number of rounds, and by the end of the game, you'll have a handle on it, no problem. And then, of course, you got many games ahead of you. One interesting thing is that the deck is completely dealt out, which means that every card is always in play. So if you're like an advanced player, you can kind of also card count and say, well, I know we haven't seen the yellow 8 yet, so I have to be aware of that. If you're casual, you can ignore that. If you take things seriously, it's another level you can go to. I personally like a little bit of, unknowingness, right? Like take a couple of cards out, we don't know which cards are out kind of thing. Just a preference. The twist here is that one player can be I think in this game they call it like a saboteur. And in this game they call it maybe the sluffer or something. And the idea is that one player, and players bid clockwise, but instead of bidding, if nobody's claimed the role yet, somebody can claim the role of the sluffer or the saboteur. Now they're guaranteed, sort of, to lose points. They lose points sort of immediately. But it's a floor. They can never lose more than that. And for every trick that other players take above and beyond their bid will be a point for the saboteur, for the sluffer, up to a maximum ceiling of 0 points. And this is a very powerful role. It's very, very tempting if the turn comes around to you and it's available to just always take it, especially with the fewer players you have playing. In fact, the rules actually suggest as a variant to actually lower that floor, so the person in a 3-player game, the person who picks that role, actually loses more points than is in the standard rules. I encourage that variant. You should definitely do that if you're playing a 3-player. Of course, you can also focus on 4 or 5. It's probably better that way anyway. So that's the monkey wrench. That role, the saboteur, the sluffer, is the kind of the monkey wrench that will mess up other people's plans. They can go either way. They can either try to win everything or lose everything, but it's better for them usually if they try to lose everything. So it's sort of like that bidding 0. Sometimes that's like shooting the moon in some trick-taking games almost, where it's like, I'm going to try to not win any tricks. And if I win 0, I get a big bonus. It's a little bit similar to that. As the sluffer, you definitely want to lose as many tricks as possible, because the more tricks other players win, the more likely they're going to take the minus 3 tokens, the black tokens, and those are worth points for the sluffer. So the sluffer will get 1 point up to a maximum of 0. Remember, because they lost points at the beginning, but they gain points up to a ceiling of 0 for every black token that other players have to take. And they take black tokens if they win a trick that they didn't expect, that they didn't bid for. So that will add a monkey wrench to the works. It's a lot of fun, but it's also kind of an automatic decision, especially when you're playing with the low player counts. It is possible to not have a sluffer, and then it's just kind of more of like a standard trick taker. But the really great thing to me about the sluffer, the saboteur, is the threat of there being one or possibly not being one. If you know there is a sluffer, or if you think that there will likely be a sluffer, but you don't want to be the sluffer, you are encouraged to bid higher, to take more tokens. Because if there is a sluffer, they're going to be constantly trying to lose. You'll probably end up with more tricks than you intended. And so it's tempting, if you think there's going to be a sluffer, to bid higher so that you don't have to take black tokens, right? There's going to be more tricks available if somebody is the sluffer. If nobody's the sluffer, then everybody's going to try to win the exact number of tricks, but you don't know, there might be a sluffer, somebody later in turn order than you. And if there is a sluffer in the round, then you're probably going to be getting more tricks than you expected. So it's tempting to bid higher. But a player who's going later in turn order doesn't have to take the sluffer roll. They could just decide that there's no sluffer in that round. And then if you're the player who took a whole lot of tokens thinking there would be a sluffer, and it turns out there isn't one, now you got to win all these tricks, and it's like, oh my god, how am I going to do that, right? So that creates a lovely set of, lovely bit of uncertainty, right? Because you don't know what the players later in turn order are going to do. It is tempting if you're kind of going early in turn order, maybe to be the sluffer, right? If it's still available, because the sluffer is a pretty powerful roll. But if somebody takes it early, then everybody else later in turn order knows there's a sluffer, and so they might bid higher as a result, and then it's harder for the sluffer to win points. So there's a really neat kind of push and pull there in terms of choosing that role. I don't know if I have the right language yet. Hopefully I'll get better with practice. This is the first time I've done a trick-taking game video, and I'm not sure I have the language used to describe to fans of trick takers why a certain game is good or bad, right? I'm approaching this from the point of view of a general purpose old school board gamer who likes to dabble in other genres once in a while. And trick taking is definitely adjacent to those old style German style games that I like. And you can see that because the German designers often try their own versions of trick takers. So Stefan Dorra has done Sluff Off Wizard Extreme as well as Niet. Let me talk about the settings a little bit. So this setting, so it's kind of generic wizard kind of, and sometimes there's races, so there's like fairy art and stuff like that, like fairies and centaurs or mermaids or whatever. And it's fine, you can ignore it. I don't know the right word to describe it, but it's too ornate, I feel. So the numbers are kind of unnecessarily ornate. And of course the art color, it kind of stands out strongly in the background, so the color of the numbers themselves, like the suits, stand out a little bit less. It's not a huge deal, and honestly this one you can kind of ignore the theme or just kind of roll your eyes and go like, okay, whatever, it's a fairy, right? You can ignore it. It's just a game with numbers and colors, honestly. So this one, Sluff Off, hews a little closer to the it's just a colors and numbers game. There are particular colors. There is art on the cards. It doesn't really matter. It is very charming art, but it also doesn't tie in together very well, I feel. So like the suits are like, there's snake and there's chickens and there's sheep, and I guess the idea is all of them can kind of slough off their feathers or their wool or their skin, right? Then you have a school child who I guess is sloughing off their backpack, which I know my son definitely does. But I'm not sure. This is the Trump suit. The blue suit in Sluff Off is the Trump suit, and it's this woman you kind of see from the back, and she's wearing torn jeans, and she's got like maybe some tattoos and blue in her hair, and it's just like, okay, she's kind of cool, but I'm not sure what she has to do with these things. The back has a little flavor text which tries to explain, and I'm not really convinced about the flavor text. I think obviously they're trying to go for like, hey, yeah, slough off, eh, you hoser, as we say in Canada. But, you know, in the end, it's colors and numbers, doesn't really matter. The tokens in this one are a little bit plain, like they just say -2, -3, and they're solid colors. This one has the colors, and they're just, again, they're simple chips. They have the symbols on them. You have to remember, and it's not hard to remember, but you have to remember, like, the black ones are worth this and the white ones are worth that. And this one actually has the penalties on them, -2, -3, -4. So in terms of playing and like learning, internalizing the game more easily, probably Sluff Off is the way to go. This one just came out a couple of years ago, maybe 3 or 4 years ago, so it should be pretty easy to find this one. Or if you're in Europe, this one should be crazy easy to find too. Amigo has published any number of editions of this one. There are tiers of trick-taking games, and they're not, I'm not saying tiers in terms of quality, but tiers in terms of accessibility, right? What's the first trick-taking game you'll learn? Maybe it's not this one, but this is a great next step trick-taker, right? It's a little intimidating to start, but once you play a round or two, you definitely get a feel for it. And there is kind of a higher threshold to learning that you might get from a more standard trick-taker. Don't quote me on that, though, because I don't play a ton of trick-taking games. But I feel like with the precise bidding on colors as well as numbers, there's definitely a lot of room to personally improve while you're playing the game. So it's a great trick-taking game, you know, a trick-taker with a twist. And it's a good one for people who aren't necessarily like just getting into trick-taking games. Maybe Wizard is a good starting point for that as an example. But for a next step, or just you want to commit yourself to learning like a good trick-taker, this is a great one. And we've enjoyed this a lot in the family. I've played it mostly 3 players, and it works. It's okay to good. You probably want more players, and I haven't played it a lot with 4 or 5. I'm just being honest. I'm kind of extrapolating based on my experience, like, oh, this is going to be even better with 4 players, right? This is a trick taker that my family and I have liked quite a bit, and it works better with 3 players than Niet. I will say that. We really like Niet, but it did not work very well for us 3 players. So for 3 to 5 players, especially 4 to 5, trick-taking with an extra little element to think about, it's a good one. Thanks for watching. Remember, older games like Sluff Off, Wizard Extreme, Die Sieben Siegel, Die Sieben Siegel, don't stop being good just because newer games come out. Take care.